Welcome to Innersight, Health Optimization with Rudy and Shaun.
Right, let's start with podcast number 8. Shaun, here we are. It's 2024, January, our first one. Actually moving into the nice stuff now. Like our listeners have listened to the first 7 podcasts. It's been a little bit of a slog trying to get out what we wanted to say. So because it is a bit academic, it's quite nice moving into what we found in our clients up to now. And it's actually quite interesting. We have found things in most people. I think there was one person that we found very little on wrong or that we could help with. But our most interesting finding was actually balance. And that's going to be our topic for today. Just again, as we break it down, balance as we think about it, the 4 pillars of fitness being aerobic fitness, strength, balance, and flexibility. So balance being one of our pieces of strength. So how we actually exert our strength on the earth, and the other side, how the earth exerts its strength back onto us, and how we go about our day-to-day life. So yeah, this is going to be interesting, bringing in nice brains from outside and not just me and you. And it's great to have a guest here, and I'll leave it to you to introduce him to us.
Yeah, so they haven't taught us much about balance in med school.
Yeah.
And that's why
true.
We need to get people in that knows a lot about balance. So Hannes Swanepoel, he's the biokineticist and local biokineticist in our town, Durban, where we stay. He's also in a practice in Cape Town. I met Hannes a long time ago. Actually, first I heard of Hannes through a friend of mine that was a client or a patient of him. And interesting, I was into the low heart rate training at that point, the full methadone methods and things like that. And he told me about this biokineticist, and they're doing exercises, low heart rate training and that stuff. And in the chat, I realized that I like the way Hannes thinks. It's very similar to the way we think. And I thought, yes, we really need to speak to Hannes at some point. Fast forward a little bit, I had a back injury last year. Annulate in my disc between L4 and L5, and I went to Hannes, and he to help me with the rehab process. But just before that, when I went to the neurosurgeon, they've done the MRI and everything, and he's testing. He made me walk down the corridor, turn around, stand on my toes, and said, "No, everything is intact." And when I saw Hannes, I saw how you should test strength, balance, and things like that. Quite an in-depth testing methods that they use, and there was a massive difference between the two sides. My left-hand side and right-hand side, there was a massive difference between the two sides. And from there onwards, we'll definitely bring Hannes on board if we do have clients or patients that need some help with their balance. Hannes, you studied up north in Northwest.
Yeah. So no, thanks for having me. Yeah, I studied in Northwest a few years ago. Started practicing in Pretoria before moving down to Cape Town about 6 years ago. Yeah, and settled in nicely here. So that's basically the journey how I got to Cape Town.
Yeah. Your area of speciality is actually running.
Yes, yeah. So my practice is very based around running injuries, running analysis, and so forth, of which stability is a very important part of the assessment part in assessing something like overuse injuries, and especially running. So mostly running. Work also a great deal with cyclists, mountain bikers. In the past, I've did a little bit of everything. Did a bit of neurological rehabilitation and so forth. But at the moment, the practice is mostly around the endurance running specific stuff.
Awesome. We appreciated you being here today and help us with this balance subject. Interesting. Most of our clients or patients at the clinic at the moment falls between the age of 35 and 55. And I'm amazed that almost all of them test badly on balance. Thinking about balance in a relative young age, if you don't do anything about the balance, that probably won't get better. It probably will just deteriorate over time. So I think it's important that we pick up if there's problems at the early stage so that we can intervene and see if we can correct it. Because balance, what's the danger of balance? I think the danger of balance is at the fall risk if you're older, if you're above 65. I mean, we're going to talk about balance in sport and the benefit and things like that, but the actual risk with having poor balance is falling.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Maybe I think we must ask Hannes, how do you test people? I mean, we have a 10-second test that we do, but what would be your first look if we send someone to you and we think there's a balance issue? How would you test someone?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of ways that or how I like to test it as well. So if you start at the very like fragile cases, older populations, strokes and so forth, we tend to go to our first entry-level test is the 10-second balance test, like you mentioned, and I know that you use as well. Most people that come for injury rehab, I'm more interested in the dynamic balance concept. Now, dynamic balance is, you can see it as the ability to complete a movement task with on the preferred movement path as well. So you want to succeed at the task, and so that means you don't want to fall when you go up a step or pick something up. So dynamic balance, we test with a couple of tests that we do. We have a modified what we call star excursion test. It's basically we have to stand on one leg and reach in 3 different directions. Now, the nice thing about these type of testing is we can objectively measure balance and put a number to it. So this helps us to see, is there a difference between left and right leg? If there's an injury or a risk of injury or a performance issue. But also it gives us a foundation from which to retest and to see, is our interventions succeeding and or not. So dynamic testing is I think my preferred go-to.
Yes, and that was actually one of the tests that I scored badly in when you saw me for the first time.
Yes, yeah. So it's a good predictive model for to see, okay, what exercises should I give you? Because it's not just the case, okay, you have lower back pain with referred pain down the right leg, for example. So, okay, now I need to give you core exercises, but we need to identify, but is there instability left and right? If you want to go back to something like running, you can't have one leg that's wobbly and you've got one bag with 2 legs plugged into it. So if the 2 legs are doing 2 different things, the poor pelvis is going to be all over the show. So what we do is we want to identify that imbalance versus left and right. And we do have some normative data that we know you need to be at as well. So we can predict how far are we away. Is stability something we do need to intervene with now, and how we intervene is exercise. So that's the one test. We've got some fancy toys these days, like we've got force plates at the practice, where we can actually quantify the single leg, like this 10-second stand test as well, where you basically stand one leg on the force plate, and the force plate actually measures how much is the foot moving to stabilize, and then we can get a lot of data from that as well to really objectively see the difference between the two. And then it also helps me to see, okay, where should we start this person? Must they just start practicing one leg balance at home and get that better before we do the dynamic stuff? Yeah. So it's quite an essential part in the assessment for most injuries, even low back pain, general low back pain a lot, because a lot of the times the question is, why is there, let's say it's lower back pain, and we say, okay, cool. The core is not keeping the lower back pelvis stable when you are going for your hike up Lion's Head, for example. Then we also have to ask, why is that? And if we identify a dynamic stability issue, then we can see, okay, but this has like a domino effect, which is putting strain, contributing to strain on the lower back, and then we can intervene like that. And dynamic testing gives us the opportunity to identify that and not just throw general exercises to it, and really specify it.
Yeah, it's almost like the chicken and egg situation.
Exactly.
You don't know if the instability or the poor balance caused the injury, or the injury causing poor movement. So it's sometimes a difficult thing, and we had that discussion with my injury as well. The origin.
Can I ask, is it possible to know these values or to test at home before you have a proper test just to know if your balance is an issue. Because, I mean, like I say, there's going to be lots of people listening to this that might not be coming to us for that first assessment. But if someone is at home, how do they test or know that their balance is an issue?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think just checking your single leg ability to stand on a single leg is a good starting point. So
For how long you can stand.
Yeah, so the criteria I use that I suggest to people is that if you can stand open eyes for at least 30 seconds, left versus right, that's a good starting point. It's very general criteria that I give. And then the level 2 will be closed eyes for at least 10 seconds. I think that's a good challenge to work on for.
Well, I can tell you none of our clients can do a 10 seconds closed eye one-legged.
So that's usually a good place to start. Then if you can't do that, then the best way to intervene before you spend the time and money to come see someone like me is practice that. Practice standing on with closed eyes. Maybe try 30 seconds, 1 minute. You'll feel the stabilizing muscles really start getting tired, and you do want to have if there's no risk of injuries and falling and so forth. So that is you have to be quite attentive to that. If you generally don't have any injuries and you're very active, I say practice that. Stand for 1 minute and see if you can improve it. And you do want to struggle a little bit because the brain basically sees that excuse the pun, that you are failing with the task. So it will try and get the muscle coordination and try different strategies to correct it. And that effort of trying to get better at it is the rehab and really improves the software side of it. So that's a good starting point there. From there on, the testing that we use is you can actually do at home as well. Is just stand on one leg and get 3 like blocks or something on the floor, on a slippery floor, and see how far you can push it away from you. Straight forward, 45 degrees left, 45 degrees right, and measure that. And then after a couple of weeks, do it again and see is that distance is getting better. That's a good home dynamic test that you can do. Yeah. So.
But let's move back a little bit. Let's just have a general chat about balance, the different aspects of balance, how it works and things like that. So we know we need to have an input, the sensory input. That's the first step in balance. And then the second step is the central processing of the data that you received from the sensation. And then the final step is the output, what you do about the message that you receive from the sensory input. And I think if we just go loosely through the different aspects, then people might understand why that's important, what you said about the learning. Part of the learning or the improvement is through doing the test so that your brain can learn how to incorporate the sensation that you receive of standing on one leg and things like that. So
yeah, it's actually the longest pathway we've got in the body. So you literally start at the feet, you feel yourself on the earth, and then you have to proprioceptively know where you are, and then with your eyes, or if your eyes are closed, with your inner ears, you have to then tell your body, okay, but I am in this space, and then you actually have to then have the feedback back the other way to then say, okay, but correct for the little bit of movement that there might or might not be. So it is actually, and while you were talking, I thought about it. It is actually one of the things that's the most difficult to train in a long. I mean, for a lot of things we pick up, we can give a tablet and we see within a month it's better. But this is actually almost a lifelong thing that you have to have for longer term.
No, absolutely. So you've mentioned the 3 senses. So you've got the proprioception from where you stand, say proprioception in the foot, in the muscle, in the joints, sending messages to the brain. You've got the visual aspect, and then you've got your inner ear, the vestibular system, helping with the balance. Looking at and there's 2 aspects to the balance as well. You can decide to do a certain movement, which is more controlled. So you get the input, and then you decide you want to step left or step right. And then you've got the other problem is when by accident the message doesn't correlate, like you have a slip, and then you need to correct. So that system is quite fast. And I've read somewhere that if you use your visual input takes about 100 milliseconds to process and then correct, whereas you've got a direct. So there's from the proprioception, it's one of the few places where the direct input, the nerve taking the message from the proprioception to the spinal cord, can also send the message back the other way at the same time, which in like 10 milliseconds, which is very fast. And that's the reflex you get. Part of the training process, as far as I understand it, then is your brain part, to then guide yourself that you can manage these impulses and movement patterns from the sensation you get. So where that's quite important is if you do like a ballet dancer or a gymnast, so that the body experiences a change in movement in space and doesn't react in a funny way.
Yeah, so the amazing thing about that, and especially the role of proprioception, is if you look at what's happening when you stand on one leg, it just sees how really amazing the system in the human body is. If you take the human body and you're standing on one leg, and if you assume most of your weight is above your hips, so you basically have like 2/3 of your weight standing on this very small foot surface area, and if you can maintain balance, you are actually achieving something pretty amazing. If you copy that dimensions and make a statue which is very top heavy on a very soft smooth surface, I mean, the wind is going to blow it off as well. And you can do that if it's well trained, obviously, without even thinking about that. And that's how amazing that circuitry about that input output is, and it's constantly happening on a subconscious level. That's pretty amazing as well. If you lose it, then it takes some training to get it back, but you can as well. And the proprioception plays a big role in that as well, because I always tell my clients to put it plainly is, if your eyes are open, you know you're not falling over because you're not falling over. If your eyes are closed, how do you know you're not falling over? And that's a big role of that, is the proprioceptive information. So the brain basically has to, very plainly put, have to use the information coming from the bottom of the foot, the ligaments and the muscles in the ankle, and draw a picture of what basically is happening and respond to that as well. So if you're hiking in the field, and you are walking and you step on a rock, and your foot is starting to shift to the side, if your proprioception is good, the brain basically, it's almost like noticing the pressure under your foot is shifting to the outside, and the muscles on the outside of your ankle is starting to stretch. Then it will, if that pathway is well developed, it responds and it activates the muscles, and you do a funny dance and you're okay. And if that is not well developed, then you fall or injure an ankle ligament as well. Very plainly put. But that's the importance that proprioception has, I think, for general population. You can take it even further to sport. I think there's a good correlation between a very agile athlete or backline player in rugby. The proprioception there is, if a center does a sidestep on the rugby field, he's not looking at where he's stabilizing. He's looking at the opponent. So you have a degree of, he's not very reliant on his sight to stabilize in that 100th of a second. So to change direction and not twist your knee, your brain has to know what the knee is doing at that split second and respond. So even on high performance, proprioception can play a big part. Yeah. So
for the older person, it's slipping or stepping off a pavement.
Exactly.
And that's when they get the fall.
Yes.
And part of the testing is, that's why we close the eyes. The closing eye test is part of the testing, is to take the visual part away, to rely more on the proprioception side of the balance equation.
So
for us in the emergency room, what we see is obviously the downside of that, where someone steps off a curb and misses it, or steps off a step and misses it and fall and break the hip. And I mean, the mortality and morbidity that comes after a fall, because as you said, the brain learns and it has to trust itself. And suddenly after a fall, it doesn't trust itself anymore.
So it's a compounding thing, because if someone had a fall, they're now a little bit more scared of
instability. So they'll avoid certain things, and then they're not practicing that system, and that then that actually influence the balance, and they get worse in the balance sector. So it's so important to not get in a position like that where you're afraid to do things because you might fall. Interesting, they've done a study here in the Western Cape where they actually looked into possible reasons or things they can do to prevent falls. But in the study, they saw that about 26% of all the participants, and they were 65 years and older, had at least one fall, and about 11% of the people had more than one fall when they did the questionnaires to collect the data and stuff. So that's quite high. I mean, the 65-year-old, 26% of 65s down in the West End, we have had a fall before. So, it happens. And you need to be able to correct or prevent the fall to start with, and then just save yourself in the fall if you do get a fall. So it's very important if we get older to make sure that our balance is good. And as we said, as we test young people and the balance is not right. So we need to start practicing that and making it better at a much earlier stage than we thought. It's actually quite important, something that's neglected.
Is there a trickle down with balance that you see from, let's say, a 40-year-old to a 65-year-old? Because, I mean, we know VO2 max has got that 10% per 10% per decade that you trickle down. But because of my question, why I asked this is we see a problem now in our 40-year-old, 45-year-olds. But if that problem is there already and they don't treat that, will it trickle down or does it stay the same? What is the...
Yeah, so there is a degree of a trickle down effect as well. I'm not 100% sure what the rate is, but it plays into what we call the good nice thing about this neuromuscular control. That sums up the whole process. So we know on the muscular side there is regression of muscle strength as you age as well. So in terms of the muscles that should be doing the output and stabilizing as well, their effect is influenced as you age as well. On the nervous system side as well, there is also deterioration amongst neurons that are receptors and output and those on that department as well. So yeah, it is there. To differentiate, I think in real life terms, I think an association becoming less active as you get older, especially if you go from the age group 40 to 60. A lot of people entering their 40 start a family and they become less and less active or time for activity. And I think a lot of the times that also has the major effect on what regression on stability. So they did actually the people that start something like strength training where there is a stability component, even for sedentary people, there's good improvements. I think that as well.
No, so I think that's the good news, is that you can improve.
Yeah.
Even if you're in your 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, at Innersight, what our saying is we want to protect muscle, brain, and heart. So, and I mean, so the things we test first, the blood tests and all that, are things you can fix quickly. But my message out of this for myself, I mean, I haven't had the test, but on the cycling and all that, you need the balance. And I'm going to come for a test. I want to know, because it's almost impossible to have a full degree, but you can test it at home. But there are steps that you should follow to know, and that's, I mean, we want to know that people will be kick-ass 80-year-olds. And if you want to be there, as we said before we start the podcast, you need to be strong. You need to have some kind of aerobic fitness, but balance is massively important. So I think that strength and balance has to go together.
No, absolutely. And I mean, even, for the young sport person, it's just having a better balance, that they manage to put power through their muscles in a better position on the ground. So they're better at, so they actually can run faster with less power because their balance are better, or or jump higher because their balance are better. And if we can just take that to an older person and build it up, you should be able to do much more when you're older. Yes, we're going to lose some muscle when we age. Yes, you're going to lose some sensation when you age. Things will, decline over time. And I think we need to work hard when we're younger to, first of all, have more reserve, and second of all, to keep it for longer.
So interesting thing that they found was with aging and the role balance plays as well. So I think the previous podcast you made the point about so that the more active you are, the health benefits start accumulating. One study I came across was they found a correlation between walking speed as a predictive measure for all-cause mortality. I think they tested 70-year-olds, and the takeaway from that is it's walking speed served as a proxy for numerous things. You need to be strong. You need to be stable to be able to walk. Like I said, you spending 600 milliseconds on one leg under I think 2 to 3 times your body weight impact forces when you walk. So if your stability is good, your walking speed increases as well, and that means you are going to walk more. That means your VO2 max can be better sustained as well. And then all that we can always go into the psychological benefits from that, from being more active and more self-sufficient as well. Yeah. So the role of stability plays, I think, it's
such a handy, very accessible thing that you can do as well. And I usually explain to my clients that come see me, see the human body is designed for a lot of movement. So endurance is one of our superpowers. And over the last, let's say over 120 years, we've lost the opportunity to move a lot as well. So for the sake of getting to drive everywhere, most of the work is done at a workstation and so forth. But now exercise is basically, but the thing is that happened extremely fast in a space of like 2 generations. I mean, with much less opportunity for activity. So the role that exercise plays now is an opportunity to get back that for which our bodies are designed. And if you think about a little bit more physical job, I mean, if you are working in your garden on a regular basis as well, for you to bend over and pick up a bag or pick up a plant or something like that, you need to be quite stable and strong and mobile. So, I mean, if that's something you've been doing all your life, you're probably in a good condition as well. But we don't have that opportunity always anymore, and that's the role where exercise plays that as well. And the testing it and assessing it is also a good way to see, okay, where are you now, where do you need to be, and how are we going to get there? Okay. And again, integral to that is stability. Yeah.
So if you look at the proprioception, that's something that you can improve. And there's certain things you can do to improve it. I mean, if we pick up someone that's got a balance issue, okay, we do the basic screening, but if we do pick it up, we'll send them on to a biokinetisist, okay, and you do some more intensive testing, and then you determine, okay, where the problem might be. But so proprioception, that's something that can improve with exercises.
Yeah. So usually that's the first phase of what you want to do. So we usually, I draw it for clients in a 3-tier model. At the top of this model, you've got 3 levels. At the top model is the activities that you do want to do. If it's walking every second day, then that's a task and a skill set that you want to do, because walking is a complex thing. For you to walk, and like we said now with the walking speed study, you need a certain quantitative attribute. Like muscles need to be strong enough to walk for 30 minutes or 45 minutes. You need to be and fit enough. These are measurable attributes. To improve this, you need to move. And movement, which is the bottom tier or the foundational tier, is a quality attribute. So if you view it like that, as you see, what's the fundamentals of good movement? It's stability and mobility. And you use then this good movement to strengthen the body. So if you're doing a sit and stand exercise, you have to move the body to get stronger. So if someone comes in with poor proprioception, and we find that's the issue, so we test that, we identify that, and I tell them, so we need to, for you to get stronger, we need to give you the ability to move well, and what's restricting you to move well is, in this case, stability or proprioceptive issue. So let's work on that first. That we call it's like neuromuscular type of training. We put you in a situation where stability is challenged, and I usually tell them the first priority is not a hardware problem. It's not that your muscles are weak. It's more of a software problem. We need the brain to write better algorithms, and then tell the muscles to coordinate better. Then if we do that after a couple of weeks, then we retest and say, okay, there is improvement. Can we move over to strength training? And the final, that piece of the puzzle to improve proprioception is the first phase of updating the software. It gives you the capacity to move well, but we want to make it a habit. And now we go to the second tier as we use strength training to strengthen this good movement. And like we know, practice makes perfect. So then it becomes a habit. Yeah. So that's the goal. And then if you get stronger, then my cue is, okay, let's see. You've got your route that you've been walking for the last 10 years. Let's see if you can walk it faster next week. And that's the final piece of that process. And then we know if we see improvements on all three levels of the testing on that, and that final level, the walking part is, how fast can you walk your 3K route that you usually do? And say, is it getting better? And if you have a heart rate monitor, is your heart rate lower than it used to be? And your speed? So then we've succeeded in functionally applying the improvement in proprioception.
Yeah. So the good news is you can improve it.
Yeah.
In your practice, how often do you see a middle or a vestibular problem? Or do you find that most of the problems is more proprioceptive problem?
It's more proprioceptive. It's not a lot. If I do suspect it, I usually refer to usually GP, or if I need someone else in the how can I say, the exercise medicine field, I'll maybe refer to a physiotherapist also, or occupational therapist, just to have a look there. But usually I do refer those on as well. Most of the time they do end up with me already knowing that this is an issue, and then our normative data doesn't usually apply 100%. I'm not gonna expect the person to reach a certain threshold if we know there's a restriction that we are limited in improving. So yeah, we try and work with what we can, and yeah.
So having said that, so if there is a hardware problem like early Parkinson's or MS or something like that, you can still train. Yes. You can still have a software update a little bit. Yes. Am I correct?
Yeah. So something like MS, there's a certain, I think, degree that you can, in certain cases, get a bit of improvement. In most cases, and I'm talking under correction here, is the main goal is just to prevent the regression. That's the main thing there as well. On that topic, you talked about testing now, which I didn't mention. In these cases, like elderly individuals, or in individuals where falling and balance is compromised because of a pathology, then we use this very nice functional test that we use. The one that I use is the Berg balance scale. It's basically a series of tasks that we do, which includes sitting and standing with your arms stretched out. It's like and it's a nice scoring mechanism to classify where are they on that stability thing. If they're above a certain area, we say, okay, the stability is actually looking not too bad. So we can maybe try and get a degree of normal activity. The mid level, we say, okay, there's a lot of restriction. Let's do a certain time period of like 12 weeks of intervention and see how much this does improve. If we do see a certain degree of improvement, see there is some room for improvement, and then we try and achieve that. And on this specific scale, if you score the lower score people, is usually what I don't see is usually wheelchair bound and those type of things. So we can classify that as well, and then make decisions on that. Yeah,
I do like the updating the software. I think even in a young person that hasn't been exercising for a while, or someone that needs to start exercising now, a lot of the problems arises when they go to the gym, or they join a CrossFit club, or they just go out too hard. And I think sometimes the software isn't in place as well. So my suggestion always with these people is, listen, go see the biokineticist, get tested, baseline, work out a program and work from there. Otherwise, you're going to injure yourself, and then that's going to set you back again.
Yeah, and I mean, I certainly didn't realize this even, let's say, 2 years ago, that how big a problem it is, and I can almost assure the listener out there that you have a balance problem. Most people, or if it's not a problem, you can improve your balance. Let's say that most people can improve their balance, and if you improve your balance, then I mean, it just sounds so simple, but it's actually quite hard, and it's I think that's why we're here for the first of these podcasts, bringing someone in to say this is how you do it, because we've seen that this is something we think should be fixed. It's
Absolutely, it's the comfort curse. As you said, we're not doing stuff anymore. We're sitting in chairs the whole day, driving around, things like that. I think we should give a task to our listeners out there, see if they can put a shoe on one leg.
Yeah, maybe what we'll do is I'll come for a test, and we'll take a video so people can see what it looks like, and put it on the YouTube channel.
That's a good idea.
It'll be quite interesting to see. I mean, I haven't done it before, so we'll take the video and then see what it looks like and where I fail, and it'll be interesting.
Absolutely, and I mean the nature of the discussion today is a lot of you need to use your imagination to see how you need to push your leg to the back 45 degrees. But if we do a video and you can actually see it, then that will help a lot.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, you say about people are surprised about how unstable or how the stability has some room for improvement. And it's a case of addressing it is just, you have to allow your body to go a little bit outside of your comfort zone as well. But it doesn't have to be very invasive. You have to join Virgin Active if you don't like going to the gym, for example. But just starting to move where stability is challenged. Like if you're doing absolutely nothing at the moment, just walking around the block, that's stimulus. That's your body needs to stabilize to walk. That's a good starting point. So if you're doing nothing, anything's better than nothing. So that's a good point to start off with. Yeah. So even the young person that goes to the gym, I said maybe instead of just doing the circuit where the machines basically you outsource the stability responsibility to the leg press machine, practice learning how to do a squat well. So a lot of the times with low back pain people, I said the thing is what we want is stability around the lower back and pelvis core area. And we do that with this basic sitting and standing exercise, and just focusing on two very specific cues that you have to follow and focus on your form. And then suddenly sitting and standing is quite hard. And then what they find is that they can't believe sitting and standing is so hard, or squatting is so hard. But then if you practice it a couple of weeks and the body starts integrating, then it becomes better. So even if you're already going to the gym, just trying about a little bit more free weight dumbbell barbell exercises, learning how to do exercises properly, you're going to get a lot of benefit, not just in terms of improving your proprioception, but you will get stronger. So,
and we had this conversation off camera, and it is you need to have your goal. So if your goal is to build muscle, then you isolate the muscle, as you said. Then you can use a fixed machine, isolating a single muscle and do the exercise. But if we talk about balance and healthy aging, then challenging yourself with free weights and things like that is a better option.
I wanted to say what we want for people is to be able to carry their groceries into up a set of stairs at home at 80. I mean, then you've got to have proper balance with two things in your hand.
Muscle power, balance, cardiovascular fitness. It all comes together, and that's part of what makes it a bit difficult is that we isolating balance now. We're talking about balance, but every aspect, it all works together. So you need all the components of muscle power, coordination, balance, fitness, everything together. So you can't do just one. You need to do all the little bits, and it all works together.
So strength training is if you put a couple of modifications. It's brilliant strength stability exercise or balance improvement exercise if you're already quite active. I mean, I tell runners working a lot with them is for running, your foot is spending about 300 milliseconds or less on the ground for every step you take, under 6 times your body weight impact forces. If your knee, for example, which is a very silly joint, can only bend backwards and forwards. If the hip is not stable and it's falling in under those forces because the muscles that's responsible for stabilizing it aren't doing their job properly. Now you're asking your knee to do backwards and forwards with a little bit of angle. So that might have 2 implications. You might start loading a structure in your knee that it's not used to dealing with the running impact forces. The other thing is now you're trying to push force into the ground, like you said in the beginning. You've got Newton's third law, action and reaction. You need that force to press back. But if you're unstable, there's a lot of force wasting. So I always use the analogy. Imagine you're going to the back of the garden to find 2 things. You're going to go on a hike, you want walking sticks. So you grab a steel pipe, and you grab a hose pipe. Both of these are very, very strong. But when you start hiking with them, the steel pipe, you're producing a lot of force. You can really get the force from your hand to the ground because the pipe is stable. The hose pipe won't break, but you have to work a lot harder and compensate a bit to eventually get the same output. Now, that's a very basic picture what happens if you are a runner or hiking up Table Mountain and you have a stability issue. Then you're working a lot harder, so your efficiency of either running or walking is influenced. So then you go up the mountain, you say, oh, I really work too hard here, I have to do strength training, and you go to leg press. But your strength will actually improve by doing a single leg squat or step up with the weight instead of going as heavy as you can. That's one of the interventions that we do. It's just a lot of times people are quite active and quite fit and quite strong. And then we just say, let's take your gym program and let's just modify it a little bit to include a bit more of a stability. Take the responsibility away from the machine and get the muscles that's supposed to be doing to do that.
Hence why we test. That's why you need to test.
Exactly. That's why.
And that's from the medical side as well. You need to test to know what's wrong and where you can improve on. And the same with athletes and even normal people that just want to age old. You need to be tested.
Yeah. No.
And then you can work from there. Know your numbers.
Know your numbers, and it's amazing how much medicine is and I talk about medicine not as a doctor, but as a whole, us as a team of medical professionals have moved in the last 10 years. I mean, like I say, balance wasn't even on my radar 5 years ago, and suddenly this is actually one of the first things I want people to know is what is your balance and how good is your balance. And it can be improved.
Awesome.
Great. It's amazing to have you here, Hannes.
It's nice to have you.
Yeah, we'll definitely need to get you back for another subject, maybe.
Yes.
Core stability.
Or more than welcome.
One of those.
Yeah, we'll our plan is to do the next one on the VO2 Max fitness, and that'll be next month, and we'll speak to Hannes probably soon after that again.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is a nice topic discussion to have as well.
So Hannes, if anyone want to get hold of you, where's your practice? How can they get hold of you if they want to be tested or anything?
Yeah,
like that?
So I'm based in Durbanville and in Cape Town City Centre. I think the easiest is go to my website. It's www.runningsmart.co.za. They're welcome to email me as well, hannes@runningsmart.co.za.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.